Millionaire tries to fire the nanny, but the son picks up and reveals a shocking truth. Before we begin today's story, I want to ask you something special. Comment down below where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories are reaching. And if you enjoy emotional love stories, subscribe to the channel. That way, you help this space grow and keep receiving new stories that will touch your heart. The digital clock in the living room read exactly 7:30 when the firm steps of Adrian Whitford echoed against the marble staircase of his Beverly Hills mansion. The sun was already shining through the white linen curtains, casting a soft light across the living room, but nothing softened the stern expression of the millionaire. He carried with him the rigidity of a man who had built a financial empire with discipline and absolute control. His navy blue suit was impeccable, the tie knot perfectly adjusted, his shoes gleaming. Every detail of his attire screamed power and perfectionism. When he reached the ground floor, his green eyes immediately locked on the scene. His daughter, Chloe, sitting alone on the couch, dressed in her school uniform but without her lunchbox, without a water bottle, without anything prepared for the school morning. The little girl was flipping through a picture book, unaware of the absence that, to Adrian, was glaringly obvious. Late again? He muttered under his breath, but loud enough for the house staff passing by in the distance to hear. His irritation wasn't just about the broken routine, but about the sense of lost control of something Adrian simply could not tolerate. He walked to the kitchen with steady steps, and every second of waiting seemed to increase his impatience. He checked his wristwatch and took a deep breath, as if counting the minutes to confirm a suspicion. It was the third time that week Hannah Sullivan had arrived late. A few minutes later, the front door swung open in a hurry. Hannah appeared, her face slightly pale, her blonde hair hastily tied in a bun with loose strands falling out. Her simple nanny uniform was wrinkled, and in her trembling hands she balanced a grocery bag and Chloe's pink backpack. Her heavy breathing betrayed that she had been running. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitford. The bus was late and I had to stop quickly at the store to buy a few things for Chloe's lunch," she said, placing the bag on the kitchen counter with visible effort to sound calm. Adrian stared at her with ice-cold eyes. He didn't respond immediately. He observed every detail: the sweat on her forehead, the tired expression, the nervous fingers trying to sort the groceries quickly. His gaze scanned Hannah as if searching for signs of a hidden lie. "It's funny how there's always an excuse." "Hannah," he finally said, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "First it's traffic, then the bus, now the store. I'm starting to wonder if this job isn't too much for you." Hannah's heart raced. She swallowed hard, unable to lift her gaze. Chloe, sensing the tension, put her book aside and ran to the nanny, hugging her around the waist. "Daddy, don't be mad at Hannah. I like her. She takes care of me," the little girl said, with the innocent tone only a child could have. For a brief moment, something in Adrian's chest wavered. His daughter's attachment to the nanny was clear, and it bothered him almost as much as the tardiness. But he didn't relent. He adjusted his tie and replied coldly, "It's not just about liking someone, Chloe. It's about trust. And I don't know if I can trust someone who can't even be on time." The words hit Hannah like a sentence. She kept her eyes fixed on the bag on the counter, trying to hide the glimmer of tears building up. Her whole body trembled, but she couldn't break down in front of him. "Mr. Whitford, she tried to begin, but her voice faltered. She chose silence instead, as she quickly organized the groceries. Her hands showed signs of nervousness. Her chest ached, not just from physical exhaustion, but from the weight of a secret she carried. With every cold judgment from Adrian, the feeling of helplessness grew. The millionaire watched her every move with suspicion. He was convinced Hannah was hiding something. In his mind, it didn't make sense that a seemingly healthy 27-year-old woman looked so worn out and showed up late so often. He clenched his fist. keeping his harsh gaze on her, while inside he formed the decision that would change all their fates. Maybe it was time to let Hannah Sullivan go once and for all. But what Adrian didn't know was that behind that tiredness, behind those rushed excuses, was a painful truth that Hannah fought every day to hide. And that secret would soon come to light, bringing not only suffering but also the twists that would forever change their lives. Silent kitchen of the mansion felt like a stage where Hannah Sullivan tried to hide her own fragility. The white marble reflected the morning light, but nothing could brighten the exhaustion etched across her face. Her hands still trembled after the harsh exchange with Adrian, and the cold sweat on her forehead wasn't just from the rush to arrive on time. It was from the silent battle she fought every day against an invisible enemy. As soon as Chloe ran to her room, Hannah discreetly leaned against the counter. Her thin body showed signs it couldn't take much more. Her legs ached, her breathing faltered, and a suffocating weight spread through her chest. With a quick motion, she opened her worn leather purse and pulled out a small box of pills. They were generics, bought from the cheapest pharmacy she could find. She knew they were only temporary relief, incapable of curing anything, but they were all she could afford. She swallowed one dry, feeling it scratch down her throat. She closed her eyes for a moment, silently repeating the words that kept her going. "I can do this. I just need to hold on a little longer," she whispered. Her voice choked. The memory of her last medical appointment returned like a shadow. The cold office, the doctor in a white coat with a serious look, explaining that she had a serious illness, but one that was completely curable with the right treatment. The problem wasn't hope, but cost. The outrageous prices echoed in her head like a cruel sentence. Hannah remembered clutching her purse tightly on her lap, hiding her tears in front of the doctor. "You have a good chance of recovery, but you can't wait too long," he had said. Words that weighed like burning iron. The creak of the side door broke the silence. Noah came running in with the light steps of a child unaware of the tragedy looming over his life. He was 8 years old, with tousled ash-blonde hair and hazel-green eyes inherited from his mother. His simple t-shirt, worn-out jeans, and torn sneakers revealed the modest life outside those luxurious walls. He ran to Hannah and clung tightly to her waist. "Mom, I thought you left early again," he said in a sweet voice, tinged with insecurity. Hannah knelt down, despite the throbbing pain that shot through her back as she bent her knees. Her light blue eyes, still misty, met his. She caressed his hair, trying to mask her anguish. "I'm never leaving you, Noah. Everything I do is for you." The boy frowned, noticing how pale she looked. He gently touched her face with his small, cold hands. "But you're different. You're tired all the time, coughing at night, and I know it's not just work. I saw you hiding the pills. Why won't you tell me what's going on?" The question struck Hannah like a blade. She swallowed hard, feeling her heart tighten. She pulled her son into a tight embrace, hiding her tears on his shoulder. "You don't need to worry about that, sweetheart. I'm just tired, but it'll pass. I promise," Noah insisted, looking at her with the premature maturity of a child who'd grown up too fast. "It's not just being tired. Mom, I saw the pills in your purse. And I heard you tell the lady at the pharmacy you couldn't afford the other ones. Why don't you buy the right medicine? The doctor said they could cure you." Hannah took a deep breath, and for a moment wished she could lie, but the weight of the truth was heavier. She ran her hand through her son's hair and answered with a trembling voice, "Because they cost way more than I can afford. Noah, I would give anything to have that money, but I don't. So I do what I can, with what little I can buy." The boy went quiet, eyes brimming with tears. He understood more than he should at his age. He gripped his mother's hand tightly. "I don't want you to die. Promise me you'll fight, Mom? Promise you won't give up?" Hannah squeezed her son's hand with every ounce of strength she had left. "I will never give up. Noah, never. I'll fight until the end." The echo of those words filled the silent kitchen. Hannah's heart pounded, torn between the courage she showed her son and the fear she kept hidden inside. Unbeknownst to them, Adrian stood in the hallway, silently watching the scene. His cold eyes took in the fragility she tried so hard to conceal. Hannah was not just a tardy employee, but a woman battling something far greater than he could yet comprehend. He furrowed his brow, locking the image in his mind, still unaware that the hidden truth he had just witnessed would become the catalyst for changing everyone's fate in that house. Hannah took a deep breath, trying to mask the pain burning in her chest and spreading across her back. The kitchen still held the tense silence from the previous scene, but it was soon broken by the soft sound of small footsteps coming down the oak staircase. Chloe appeared, bathed in the morning light streaming through the wide windows. She wore a neatly pressed light blue school uniform, white folded socks, and shiny black patent leather shoes that looked brand new. Her light brown hair was tied into 2 long braids that bounced with each movement. In her delicate hands, she firmly held a beige teddy bear, faded with time, her innocent eyes full of pride. "Look, Hannah, Teddy's going to school too today," she exclaimed excitedly, lifting the toy like she was introducing an important friend. A smile bloomed on Hannah's pale face. She bent down with effort, feeling the pain intensify, but didn't let a single groan escape. She gently smoothed the girl's braids and replied affectionately, "Then Teddy's going to learn a lot today. But first, we need to pack Chloe's lunch, and Teddy's too." The girl laughed with the spontaneity of someone who didn't yet know life's harshness. She ran to the counter, setting the bear down and watching the nanny's every move as if witnessing a magical ritual. Despite her weakened state, Hannah moved gracefully. She washed fruit, cut sandwiches, organized colorful lunchboxes. Her hands trembled slightly, but the care she put into every detail revealed a love that went far beyond duty. Chloe, fully attentive, watched with green eyes full of admiration. She stepped closer and tugged on the hem of Hannah's blouse. "Hannah, when you're here, the house feels different. It's happier. Can I tell you a secret?" Hannah smiled, even as her eyes filled with tears, and leaned down to listen. "Of course, my angel." "What's the secret?" The girl whispered, as if revealing something precious. "I wish you were my mommy." The words pierced Hannah's heart like an arrow. She swallowed the tears, caressed the girl's delicate face, and answered with a choked but sweet voice, "You already have a mommy who loved you very much, Chloe. But while I'm here, I'll take care of you like you were my own daughter." The girl smiled and hugged the nanny tightly around the neck. The teddy bear dropped to the floor, forgotten. Hannah closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel that embrace like a balm amid her pain. At the top of the stairs, Adrian silently observed. His light gray suit highlighted his impeccable posture, but his hardened green eyes captured every detail of the scene. He saw his daughter laugh, hug Hannah, trust her in a way she never did with him. And that stirred a deep unease. He clenched his fists, fighting against a feeling he couldn't quite name. Jealousy, suspicion, or guilt. Unaware of her father's presence, Chloe grabbed Hannah's hand and asked, "Promise you'll never leave me? Not even when Daddy gets mad?" Hannah's heart tightened at the innocent plea. She held the girl's tiny hands and answered firmly, even knowing that life could tear that promise away at any moment. "I promise, Chloe. I'll always be by your side." At that moment, Adrian descended the last steps, finally making his presence known. The room seemed to tense. Hannah stood quickly, masking her pain, and Chloe ran to her father, grabbing his hand with the same enthusiasm. "Daddy, Hannah said she's going to take care of me forever. Isn't that wonderful?" Adrian looked at his daughter, then at the nanny. His lips curled into a cold half smile, but his eyes held suspicion. "Promises are easy to make, Chloe. The hard part is keeping them." The mood grew heavy. Hannah felt her legs weaken, but stood firm, not daring to respond. Inside her, the fear grew. She knew Adrian was watching her closely, that every move was being judged. Still, she couldn't help but give Chloe her whole heart at that moment. The girl hugged the nanny again, as if instinctively trying to shield her from her father's harshness. The contrast between the child's tenderness and the millionaire's coldness filled the room with silent tension. And in Adrian's gaze, even masked by his rigidity, a doubt was beginning to form. Maybe Hannah wasn't just an employee hiding secrets, but the only person capable of giving his daughter something money could never buy. True love. Night had fallen over Beverly Hills, and the lights of the Whitford mansion lit up the glass and marble facade like the beacons of a modern palace. Inside, however, the atmosphere was tense. In the dining room, a long solid oak table stretched out in front of Adrian, with crystal glasses and porcelain plates impeccably set. Chloe, now changed into pink pajamas with little stars, ate distractedly, cheerfully talking about her school day. Hannah, wearing an apron, moved silently around the room, clearing plates, adjusting glasses, always with light steps, careful not to disturb. But nothing escaped Adrian's gaze. He watched every detail with the calculated coldness of a man used to controlling everything around him. The recent delays, the worn expression, Hannah's exhausted demeanor, all of it piled up in his mind like a list of unforgivable failures. And with every smile Chloe gave the nanny, his resentment grew. When his daughter finished eating, she grabbed her teddy bear and ran to the adjoining room. The door closed gently, leaving father and nanny alone. Adrian laid down his silverware firmly. The metallic sound against the porcelain echoed through the room, making Hannah flinch slightly. He lifted his wine glass to his lips, took a slow sip, like a man preparing to deliver a final verdict. "That's enough, Hannah," he said, deep voice calm. But laced with authority. She stopped in front of him, still holding a damp plate. Her heart raced. She tried to stay composed, but her hands trembled. "Mr. Whitford, if I did something wrong, I can fix it." His gaze pierced through her like ice. "It's not just something wrong. It's everything. You show up late, you're constantly exhausted, and frankly, I don't know if I can trust my daughter's well-being to someone who can't even manage her own life." The words cut like blades. Hannah swallowed hard, lowering her eyes. "I swear I'm doing my best. Chloe, she needs stability, and Adrian slammed his open hand on the table, not in anger, but in firm resolution. The crystal glasses rattled at the sound. "Don't give me excuses. The only thing my daughter needs is trust. And I don't have that in you anymore." Silence overtook the room. The air felt heavier, as if the walls were closing in on her. Hannah tried to gather strength, but the tears threatened to fall. "Please, don't do this. I can't lose this job." Her voice was shaky, barely more than a whisper. Adrian leaned back in his chair, staring at her coldly. His light gray suit, perfectly tailored, stood in sharp contrast to her fragile figure. He pulled his phone from his inside pocket, swiped the screen, and said with a cutting tone, "If I can't trust you here, I'll take care of it right now. There are agencies that can send someone more competent by tomorrow." Hannah's heart pounded. She saw him typing something, and panic washed over her. Her hands clenched into fists, trying to steady the tremble. "Wait," she cried, stepping forward. "Please, just give me one more chance. I promise you won't regret it." Adrian looked up from his phone, staring at her in silence. His gaze was harsh, but a shadow of doubt, barely visible, flickered in his eyes. From the other room, Chloe's sweet voice rang out, calling for the nanny. "Hannah, come play with me. Teddy's waiting." For a moment, the millionaire hesitated. His eyes drifted to the partially open door where his daughter's voice came from, and his stern expression seemed to waver. But it quickly hardened again. He gripped the phone tighter, resolute. "Don't mistake my daughter's affection for job security. My decision is final," he said in a low, solemn tone. In that moment, Hannah's fate seemed sealed. But what neither of them knew was that when Adrian finally placed that call, it wouldn't be Hannah who answered. It would be Noah, her son. And in his innocence, he would reveal a truth capable of turning everything upside down. Adrian rose from the dining table, still holding his phone. The screen's glow lit up his face, highlighting his cold, implacable expression. He walked toward his office, a spacious room lined with bookshelves, heavy curtains, and a mahogany desk that reflected his image like a mirror. Sitting in the leather chair, he straightened his posture and, without hesitation, dialed Hannah's number, determined to put an end to this story once and for all. On the other end, after a few seconds, a child's voice answered. "Hello?" Adrian frowned. It wasn't Hannah. The sweet, innocent tone gave away the child's age immediately. "Who is this?" he asked firmly. "It's Noah, Hannah's son," the boy replied casually, as if talking to strangers on the phone was completely normal. Adrian adjusted himself in the chair, caught off guard. He knew of the boy's existence, but had never spoken to him directly. He opened his mouth to ask for Hannah, but the child spoke first. "Mister, please? Don't be mad at my mommy." Adrian's heart skipped a beat. He fell silent, listening to the short, nervous breaths of the boy on the other end. "She doesn't come home tired because she's lazy," Noah continued, his voice trembling. "It's because she's sick. Sometimes I see her crying when she can't buy her medicine." The words hit the room like thunder. Adrian's phone nearly slipped from his hand. He, the man who prided himself on controlling every detail of his life, felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. "Sick?" he muttered, his voice lower than he intended. Noah didn't notice the disbelief in his tone and kept talking, completely unfiltered. "She says she can't lose her job because it's the only way to buy food for me, and also to take care of Chloe. She gets so worried when she thinks you don't like her." A heavy silence took over the line. Adrian slowly leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting toward the shelves of books in front of him. The pride that made him judge Hannah was crumbling, word by word. I understand," he finally said, with difficulty. "Noah, can you put your mom on the phone? She's resting right now. She hurts when she gets home, but she doesn't tell you because she's scared. I just didn't want you to be mad at her." Adrian closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to say. The weight of the revelation was heavier than his ego. The world he believed he controlled with contracts, numbers, and quick decisions was collapsing, undone by the innocence of a child. The call ended in silence. Adrian stayed seated, motionless, phone still pressed against his ear. His heart was pounding, a mix of disbelief and guilt swelling inside him. Hannah's face came to his mind, exhausted, pale, trying to hide the pain. And now, through the voice of her son, the truth had finally surfaced. At the half-open door of the office, Chloe stood watching her father curiously. She didn't understand, but she could tell that something in his face had changed. The hardness had given way to a restlessness she had never seen in him before. And in that moment, Adrian understood. Nothing would ever be the same again. Night had already settled deep over Beverly Hills when Adrian sent for Hannah to come to the office. The warm yellow light of the wall sconces cast long shadows over the bookshelves, and the air carried a tension so heavy it almost crackled. Hannah entered slowly, still wearing her simple uniform, the messy bun letting loose strands of blonde fall around her tired face. Her pale blue eyes avoided his. "Close the door, please," Adrian ordered. Without lifting his gaze from the papers he pretended to read on the mahogany desk. She obeyed in silence, but her heart thundered in her chest. She could feel something was about to happen. "I need to talk to you." "Hannah," he began, resting his elbows on the desk and interlacing his fingers. And this time, I want the truth. Hannah bit her lip, trying to stay calm. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Whitford. Adrian raised his eyes, fixing her with a gaze so sharp it seemed to cut through her. Your son told me. Noah. Her body went cold. Instinctively, she stepped back, as if searching for an escape. He's just a child. He must have misunderstood. Adrian's voice turned firm, almost cutting. Don't lie to me. He told me about your illness, about the medicine you can't afford. And now I want to hear it from you. Tears began to well in Hannah's eyes, but she still tried to resist. I just get tired. That's all. It's nothing serious. Adrian slammed his palm on the desk, not in rage, but in finality. The crystal glasses on a nearby tray rattled slightly. Enough with the excuses, Hannah. I saw you stumbling in pain. I saw your pale face. I heard my daughter beg you not to leave her. And now your son confirms everything you keep trying to hide. If you don't tell me the truth, I will find it out myself. Hannah felt her entire body weaken. There was nowhere left to run. She lowered her head, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. Her voice came out faint, heavy with pain and resignation. It's true. I'm sick. Adrian didn't move. He studied every gesture, every crack in her voice. It's serious but treatable. The problem is the treatment costs more than I could ever dream of affording, she continued, her voice trembling through quiet sobs. So I buy cheap medication just to ease the pain. I know it's not enough. I know I'm risking my life, but I can't lose this job. It's the only way I can feed Noah. He only has me. With every word, Hannah seemed to be shedding a layer of armor she had carried for months. Her vulnerability stood before Adrian like a raw wound. He took a deep breath, feeling something inside himself break. The image he had built of an irresponsible employee crumbled in the face of that confession. You chose to risk your life just to keep working here? He asked in disbelief. Yes, Hannah said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Because if I give up, there's nothing left for my son. I can endure the pain. I can endure the humiliation. I can endure being looked down on, but I could never bear to see him go hungry or without a roof over his head. The silence that followed was suffocating. Adrian leaned back in his chair, looking at her with a mix of shock and guilt. Never in his life had he come face to face with such a brutal truth or such quiet bravery. For a moment, he wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words simply didn't come. And Hannah, fragile and trembling, stood before him, more exposed than ever, waiting for the verdict that could define her future. Adrian remained silent, as if time itself had stopped inside that office. The distant sound of wind against the windows and the ticking of the wall clock grew louder, filling the space his words couldn't reach. Across from him, Hannah stood with tear-filled eyes and slumped shoulders, as though she had handed over not just a confession, but her very soul. The image he had of the nanny, the late, seemingly careless employee who always arrived exhausted, was now in pieces before the truth. She wasn't lazy nor negligent. She was a woman at war, against her own body, against time, and against the brutal weight of not having enough. Adrian leaned back in the leather chair, covering his face with his hands for a few seconds. When he looked at her again, his voice no longer carried the same coldness or control. I judged you, and I was cruel. Hannah took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. I didn't want you to know. I just needed to keep this job. It's all I have. He lowered his gaze, unable to meet the pain she carried in her eyes. Guilt was tightening around his chest like a vice. How had he not seen it before? How had his prejudice blinded him so completely? A soft sound interrupted the moment. The office door creaked open slowly, and Chloe walked in, hugging her teddy bear to her chest. Still in her pink pajamas, her green eyes sparkled with worry. Daddy, Why are you mad at Hannah? She didn't do anything wrong. Adrian turned to his daughter, surprised. His heart tightened as he watched the little girl run to the nanny and throw her arms around her with all the strength she had, as if trying to shield her from any injustice. Hannah knelt to return the embrace, despite the throbbing pain in her body. I don't want her to leave, Chloe said, her voice breaking. She's the only one who makes me feel safe when I'm scared. Hannah tells me stories before bed, holds my hand when I have nightmares. She's like a mom to me. Her words struck Adrian like a punch to the chest. His breath faltered for a moment. The same man who had always believed he could offer his daughter the very best, expensive schools, luxury toys, designer clothes, now realized he had failed her in the most essential way, providing love and presence. He moved toward them slowly, then knelt beside them both. Chloe's eyes, so honest and full of light, reflected a truth he could no longer deny. You're right, Chloe, he murmured, placing a hand on her shoulder. Hannah doesn't deserve my anger. Surprised by the sudden shift in his tone, Hannah lifted her teary eyes to him. Adrian looked away quickly, unable to withstand the weight of her gaze. For the first time in a very long time, the powerful millionaire felt small in the presence of a woman who, with so little, gave everything she had. Chloe smiled, still wrapped around Hannah, relieved to feel the air in the room begin to soften. But Adrian knew deep down, nothing was truly resolved. The shame and guilt churned inside him, a storm that wouldn't easily pass. And that night, when he went upstairs to his room and faced his reflection in the mirror, Adrian didn't see the successful businessman. He saw a flawed father and a man who had unjustly condemned someone who was simply fighting to survive. He knew then a decision had to be made, one that would change the fate of everyone in that house. Adrian spent the entire night awake. The digital clock beside the bed ticked forward slowly, and despite the luxury of his fine linen sheets, sleep never came. Hannah's confession echoed in his mind like a weight he couldn't shake. He kept seeing Chloe's eyes, the way his daughter clung to the nanny like her life depended on her. For the first time, the millionaire felt that all his money, his empire, his buildings and shares meant nothing compared to the fragility of a woman fighting simply to survive. The next morning, he summoned Hannah to the office. She entered with her head down, wearing the same simple clothes as always. Her blue eyes looked even more sunken than the night before, marked by sleepless hours, and her hands gripped the strap of her worn bag tightly. Please, sit down, Adrian said, his tone softer than usual. Hannah obeyed, but her posture remained stiff, like someone awaiting a final verdict. I've thought about everything you told me last night, he began, taking a deep breath. And I've made a decision. She bit her lip, bracing herself for the words she feared most. You're going to fire me. Adrian slowly shook his head. No, I'm not firing you. On the contrary, I'm going to pay for your full treatment. The words struck like lightning. Hannah's eyes widened, stunned. Double quotes, no, you can't do that. I don't want charity. Adrian leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. His voice was steady, but his gaze had softened, more human now than ever before. This isn't charity. It's justice. I judged you without knowing, condemned you in silence, and I was wrong. You need to live, Hannah. For yourself, for Noah, and for my daughter. Tears welled up in her eyes, but with them came resistance. If I accept, I'll feel like I owe you forever. And I don't know if I can carry that. Before Adrian could reply, the door swung open. Chloe burst into the room, still in her school uniform, dragging Noah by the hand. Their smiles faded as they picked up on the tension in the air. Is everything okay, Daddy? Chloe asked, wrapping her arms around Hannah's waist. You're not sending Hannah away, right? Noah looked up at his mother, fear and hope flickering in his eyes. Mom, please let him help. I don't want to lose you. Hannah's heart shattered. Her son's eyes were filled with quiet desperation, while Chloe clung to her as if afraid she might vanish. She drew a deep breath, wrestling with her pride. Everything inside her screamed to refuse, but the love she felt for those two children was stronger than any pride she could hold on to. "I accept," she said, her voice trembling, "but not because I want to depend on you, Mr. Whitford. I accept because I can't say no to the chance to stay alive for my son. And for this little girl I've learned to love like my own." Adrian nodded, feeling a knot tighten in his throat. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just about solving a problem. It felt like changing a life, maybe even his own. And as Hannah let herself be embraced by the children, caught between gratitude and the fear of growing too attached, Adrian realized something even deeper. Helping her wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something new. Something he, with all his wealth and power, might not be able to control. The weeks that followed marked a quiet but profound transformation in Adrian Whitford's life. The millionaire who once filled his days with luxury meetings, business dinners, and million-dollar decisions now found himself in places he never imagined setting foot in. His sleek black car, with tinted windows and pristine leather interior, now parked twice a week in front of a modest clinic. There, seated next to Hannah in a plain waiting room, Adrian encountered an unfamiliar feeling: vulnerability. Hannah, dressed simply and always wearing a scarf draped over her shoulders to conceal the weight loss caused by her illness, kept her eyes lowered, uncomfortable with her new reality. She had never wanted to depend on anyone. But now, beside him, she was learning what it meant to allow herself to be cared for. Adrian held her medical files, double-checked appointment times, asked the doctors for treatment updates. His posture remained firm, but it had changed. There was no longer arrogance in his presence, only care. "You don't have to do all this," Hannah said one afternoon after another consultation. Her voice was soft, almost as if she needed to believe it herself. Adrian glanced at her as they walked down the corridor lit by sterile fluorescent lights. "It's not about having to. I want to. It's the least I can do after everything you've gone through alone." She lowered her gaze again, too moved to reply. And the silence between them said more than words ever could dot at home. The changes were just as clear. Noah, who once looked at Adrian with suspicion, slowly began to open up to him. One night, when Chloe insisted they all have dinner together, Adrian surprised everyone by helping serve the food. "Curious," Noah asked, "do you always eat at big tables with lots of important people?" Adrian smiled, a smile different from any he had worn before, warmer. "Yes, but none of those tables are as important as this one." Hannah watched the scene in silence, her heart warming against her will. That cold, distant man was now chatting with her son like he belonged, like they all belonged. Chloe, meanwhile, was thriving. She laughed more, slept better, and on the nights when nightmares once haunted her, she now asked, "Daddy, let Hannah tell me a story, and then you stay here too, okay?" Adrian agreed. He'd sit on the edge of the bed while Hannah read in her gentle voice. Chloe would fall asleep nestled between them, and in those moments, a picture formed, one none of them dared name, the portrait of a family quietly being born. The respect Adrian felt for Hannah grew each day. He remembered how he once called her unreliable, and now he watched in awe as she faced the side effects of chemotherapy with silent strength, never missing a smile for Chloe, never letting go of Noah's hand. One afternoon, while watching her play with the kids in the garden, Adrian realized something that shook him. Admiration was no longer enough. What he felt had grown into something deeper, stronger, riskier. That night, alone in his office, Adrian finally admitted what he had been trying to deny. "I love her." The words echoed through the room like a verdict. He, the man who handled billion-dollar deals and kept his heart under lock and key, now found himself completely undone by a feeling he couldn't control. On the other side of the house, Hannah quietly closed the door of the small room she shared with Noah. She sat on the edge of the bed, ran her fingers through her loose blonde hair, and felt her heart race at the memory of how Adrian had looked at her that afternoon, how he'd held her hand for a few seconds longer than necessary. Part of her was filled with gratitude. Another part feared losing herself to the feeling. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I can't let this happen. I can't get attached." But it was already too late. For both of them, love had already begun to bloom in silence, transforming everything around them. And as the children slept peacefully in their beds, a different kind of tension filled the air. The certainty that something powerful was being born, something that could change all their lives forever, for joy or for heartbreak. Months had passed, and the Whitford mansion was no longer the same. Once marked by cold silence and the pristine sterility of marble and glass, the house now overflowed with life. The garden, once immaculate but lifeless, had taken on a new role, a stage for Chloe and Noah's laughter, their games among the rose bushes, their joy filling every corner with genuine happiness. Hannah, now fully recovered from treatment, walked behind them with a serene smile. Gone were the dark circles, the fragile body, the shadowed eyes. Her skin had color again, her blonde hair shimmered in the morning light, and her blue eyes held a spark of hope, something that had once seemed unreachable. From the upper balcony, Adrian watched the scene with a cup of coffee in hand. He still wore his perfectly tailored suits, but they no longer carried the same weight of arrogance. The man who once thrived on control numbers and contracts now found joy in the simple sound of his daughter's laughter, in hearing Noah call him over to kick a ball. In Hannah's presence anchoring their home, he slowly walked down the steps and approached them. Chloe ran to him and grabbed his hand tightly. "Daddy, did you see? Hannah runs fast now. She beat us in the race." Adrian smiled, his eyes meeting Hannah's. For a moment, their gaze locked, intense, but warm. There was still caution in her heart, but also silent gratitude. Noah, sweaty from playing, came up and said in a serious tone like a little man, "Mr. Whitford, thank you for saving my mom." Adrian knelt before him and placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "Don't call me Mr. Whitford, Noah. You can call me Adrian. And I didn't save her. It was her courage and your love." Hannah heard those words with tears forming in her eyes. Never had she imagined herself in that place, let alone being acknowledged like that. She had feared always being seen as just the nanny, someone who would blend into the background of a wealthy household. But now she knew she was part of it. Part of this family. One Sunday afternoon, they all sat around the dinner table together. Unlike the quiet, tense meals of the past, there were now stories, laughter, and even little squabbles over who would get the last slice of cake. Adrian looked around and felt something he had never known before: peace. He raised his glass and spoke with a firm voice. Though the emotion in it was undeniable, I spent years thinking wealth defined me. But now I know it's not the businesses, the properties, or the bank accounts that give meaning to a man's life. What truly matters is loving and protecting those the world places in our path. The silence that followed was broken by Chloe, who hugged him tightly. "I always knew you had a big heart, Daddy." Hannah looked away, trying to hold back tears, but Adrian reached under the table and took her hand in his. It was a simple gesture, yet full of meaning. There were no more labels. No boss and employee. No millionaire and nanny. Just two souls who had found each other through pain and resilience, and now shared something deeper than either of them had dared imagine: love. Life had not gone back to how it was. It had become something better. Hannah was no longer just the caretaker. She was the heart of the home. Noah had found safety. Chloe had discovered a mother's love. And Adrian had finally learned the one lesson no boardroom could ever teach. True wealth lies in the love we give and the love we're brave enough to receive. That night, as Adrian entered his room and stood before the mirror, he didn't see the businessman. He saw a father, a protector, a partner, and he smiled, like someone who had finally understood what life is really about. And so we reached the end of this story of love, resilience, and transformation. But now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments so I know how much it touched your heart. If this story moved you, give it a like, share it with someone special, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. And before you go, I've picked out another emotional story that will touch you even deeper. Don't miss it.